Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. If I told you that by simply trying on your ex-girlfriend's old pair of jeans, you could have her legs, would you believe me? I wouldn't have. Not a year ago. A year ago, I was Jason, 47 years old, a model scout living in a decent but lonely apartment in Chicago, surrounded by the ghosts of a life I'd failed to live. My job was a cruel irony. Day in and day out, I scouted for beauty, for the perfect female form. I'd spot a girl on the street the way she walked, the line of her jaw, the effortless grace in her posture, and I'd see a potential star. I had an eye for it. My agency trusted me, but every time I looked at one of these young women, a part of me, a deep and shameful part, didn't just want to discover her, it wanted to be her. This wasn't a new feeling. It had been my shadow my entire life, a constant, quiet hum beneath the surface of my masculinity. As a boy, I'd secretly try on my mother's heels, stumbling around in the dark of her closet, my heart pounding with a thrilling, terrifying cocktail of guilt and rightness. As a teenager, I'd steal glances at the girls' clothing sections in department stores, imagining the feel of soft fabrics against my skin. But I learned quickly to push it down, to bury it under layers of what a man was supposed to be. I played sports, dated women, got a respectable job. I built the entire architecture of my life as a prison for the woman who lived inside me. And now, at 47, the prison was starting to feel like a tomb. My last girlfriend, Sarah, had left me 6 months prior. "You're just not present, Jay," she'd said, her voice more sad than angry. "It's like you're a million miles away." She was right. How could I be present with her when I wasn't even fully present in my own body? That's where I was, one lonely Tuesday night, scrolling aimlessly through the internet. When I found it, it wasn't on Google or any normal site. I'd fallen down a rabbit hole of strange forums, fringe science discussions that eventually led me to the dark web. I was just clicking, killing time, when a banner ad flickered at the edge of the screen. It was minimalist, just black text on a gray background. Reclaim, redefine, remake the Genesis powder. Curiosity, that fatal human flaw, got the better of me. I clicked. The product page was sparse, claiming the powder was a temporary biometric catalyst. The instructions were bizarre. Apply a small amount to an article of clothing with a strong personal or emotional resonance. Wear the garment. The effect is linked to the garment's original owner. It sounded like utter nonsense, a snake oil scam for the desperate. But then I saw the reviews. They were anonymous, of course, but their specificity was chilling. Used my brother's old football jersey. I was him for 10 minutes, felt his muscles, freaked me out. 5 stars, will not be doing that again. Borrowed my boss's scarf. Suddenly I had her sharp nose and power suit shoulders. The feeling of authority was intoxicating. And then, the one that stopped my heart. My ex-girlfriend left a pair of jeans at my place. I just wanted to feel close to her again. I tried this stuff. I didn't just feel close to her. I became her. For 5 minutes, I had her legs, her hips. I saw her body in my mirror. I can't explain it. It works. My breath caught in my throat. I looked across my bedroom to the corner chair, where a small pile of Sarah's forgotten things still sat. On top was the pair of skinny jeans she'd loved. The ones that always made me catch my breath when she wore them. The desire I had suppressed for 47 years roared to life. It was a physical ache, a howling need that drowned out all logic, all reason, the fear of being scammed, the fear of the unknown. It was nothing compared to the lifetime of fear I'd already endured, the fear of never knowing what it felt like. My hands were trembling as I navigated the cryptocurrency payment system. It felt illicit, dangerous, but the confirmation email arrived almost instantly. Your order is on its way for the next 3 days. I was a wreck. I barely slept. I'd jump at every sound from the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. What had I done? Was I insane? Then, the package arrived. It was a simple plain brown bubble mailer with no return address. Inside, cushioned in foam, was a tiny glass vial no bigger than my thumb. It was filled with a fine, shimmering, silver-gray powder. Tucked alongside it was a small card with the same cryptic instructions I'd seen online. Use with an article of clothing that holds a strong personal connection to the desired form. To reverse, wear a garment with a strong connection to your original self. That night, I waited until the city outside my window had fallen into a deep, hushed slumber. The vial sat on my nightstand, gleaming in the soft glow of my bedside lamp. It looked so innocuous, yet it held the potential to either shatter my world or finally make it whole. My life had been a long, slow compromise. Tonight, I was done compromising. The air in my bedroom was thick with anticipation. I felt like a teenager about to do something terribly wrong, my pulse a frantic drum against my ears. I walked over to the chair and picked up Sarah's clothes. The jeans were a soft, faded denim, worn in all the right places. I held them up, their small size a stark reminder of the gulf between my body and the one I craved. I also picked up a simple white blouse of hers, made of a soft, silky material. I remembered her wearing it on one of our first dates. I laid the clothes on my bed, a strange offering to an unknown god. My hands shook as I uncorked the vial. The powder had no smell. It looked like dust from a fallen star. Following the vague instructions, I sprinkled a tiny amount, barely a pinch, onto the waistband of the jeans and the collar of the blouse. The powder seemed to dissolve into the fabric, leaving no trace. This was it. The point of no return. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest as I undressed. I stood there in my boxers, a 47-year-old man with a softening middle, thinning hair, and skin that was beginning to lose its fight with gravity. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror on my closet door, at this familiar, disappointing vessel, and then I looked at the clothes on the bed. I started with the jeans. They were ridiculously tight. I had to lie down on the bed just to pull them up over my hips, my thicker, male frame protesting every inch of the way. I sucked in my gut and managed to fasten the button. The denim was constricting, a tight band around my waist and legs. It felt absurd. Then, I pulled on the blouse. My shoulders were too broad, the fabric straining at the seams. I could barely get the buttons to meet over my chest. I stood up, feeling like a sausage stuffed into a casing that was 2 sizes too small. I felt foolish, pathetic. This was a scam. Of course it was. I was a desperate old man playing dress-up. But then, it started. It began as a low, warm tingle in my legs, right where the denim was tightest. It wasn't painful, but it was deeply, fundamentally strange. I looked down and watched, in stunned disbelief, as the fabric of the jeans began to relax. Not because it was stretching, but because what was underneath was changing. The tingling intensified, spreading up my thighs and around my hips. It felt like my very cells were being rearranged, like a sculptor was working on me from the inside out. I felt a pulling sensation at my waist, a gentle but firm cinching, as the thick muscle and fat around my midsection seemed to melt and redistribute. My hips broadened with a soft, deep ache, pushing against the denim until it fit not with strain, but with a perfect, glove-like snugness. My legs felt like they were being stretched, refined, the coarse hair receding back into the skin, leaving them smooth and slender. I could feel the muscles shifting, becoming longer, leaner. At the same time, the blouse began to fit differently. The pressure across my shoulders eased. As they narrowed slightly, the real shock came from my chest. A new sensitivity bloomed there, followed by a swelling, a gentle, wondrous expansion. I watched, mesmerized, as the fabric of the blouse, which had been stretched taut across my flat chest, now draped over 2 soft, perfectly formed breasts. They felt tender, real, a part of me. The whole process took maybe a minute, but it felt like an eternity. When the sensation subsided, I was left breathless, my body humming with a strange new energy. I was terrified to look up, to see the result. My eyes were fixed on the floor. I could see my feet. They looked smaller, more delicate. Slowly, I lifted my head and met my own gaze in the mirror. But it wasn't my gaze. It was hers. Staring back at me was Sarah. It was her face, her body, her everything. The same delicate jawline, the same sweep of brown hair. Where had the hair come from? The same slender legs encased in those familiar jeans. The white blouse now hung perfectly on her, on my frame. I raised a hand, and the reflection did the same. The hand was smaller, the fingers more slender, the nails neatly shaped. A wave of vertigo washed over me. I stumbled back, catching myself on my dresser. My voice came out as a strangled gasp. And it wasn't my voice. It was a higher, softer sound. It was her voice. The initial shock was a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated horror. This was wrong. This was a violation of some fundamental law of nature. I had stolen someone else's body. I was an imposter, a thief. But underneath the horror, another feeling bubbled up, something hot and thrilling and undeniable elation. I took a tentative step. The body moved with a grace that was utterly foreign to me. I felt the gentle sway of my new hips, the way my thighs brushed against each other. It was the single most incredible sensation I had ever experienced. I walked to the mirror and placed a hand on my flat stomach, then let it drift up to cup one of my breasts. The feeling was electric. It was real. This body was, for this moment, mine. The sight of Sarah's face in the mirror was too much, too jarring. It felt like a betrayal. But the body felt like coming home. I closed my eyes, trying to separate the feeling from the image. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of rightness in my own skin, even if it wasn't technically my own skin. The guilt, however, was a potent antidote to the euphoria. It crept back in, cold and sharp. I had to change back. Now, I couldn't stay like this, in this stolen form, frantically. I unbuttoned the blouse, my new nimble fingers fumbling with the tiny buttons. I tore off the jeans. The moment the clothes were off, the magic was broken. I stood there, naked, as Sarah. I scrambled for my own clothes, the old, worn-out boxers and t-shirt I'd discarded on the floor. The instructions said to use a garment with a strong connection to my original self. Nothing was stronger than the clothes I'd lived in for years. The moment I pulled them on, the reversal began. It was just as intense, a strange rewinding of the process. My chest flattened, my hips narrowed, my legs grew thicker and more solid. I felt the familiar weight of my male body settle back onto my bones. In seconds, it was over. I was Jason again, standing in my bedroom, panting, my heart still racing. I looked in the mirror. My familiar, tired face stared back, but something was different. The despair that usually resided in my eyes was gone. In its place was a wild, dangerous spark. I hadn't just been scammed. I had been given a key. I had felt it, tasted it. The dream wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was real. It was possible. And as I stood there, the guilt began to fade, replaced by a single, all-consuming thought I had to do it again. But next time, it wouldn't be as Sarah. It would be as me. The next few days were a blur of obsessive planning. I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I didn't want to be a copy of anyone. The experience of wearing Sarah's body had been both a revelation and a violation. It was her form, her face, her history reflected in the mirror. What I wanted was not to steal a life, but to build one, my own. The powder worked with clothing that held a strong personal connection to its owner. That meant I couldn't just buy clothes off the rack. I needed clothes that had been lived in, imbued with the essence of the women who wore them. And if I didn't want to become a single person, but rather an ideal version of myself, then I would need to assemble that self piece by piece. The idea struck me with the force of a lightning bolt. I wouldn't use one person's entire wardrobe. I would use individual pieces from many different women. A pair of shorts from one for her legs, a bra from another for her chest, a hat from a third for her face and hair. I would be a curator, an artist. My body would be my masterpiece. My new hunting ground became Facebook Marketplace. It was perfect. It was a treasure trove of used clothing, sold by people in my own city. Each item saturated with the personal history I needed. It was also terrifyingly intimate. I created a fake profile. A generic-looking woman named Jen who was supposedly a fashion student working on an upcycling art project. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was the best I could come up with. My heart hammered in my chest the first time I messaged a seller. "Hi, is the white tennis skirt still available? My niece would love it, Jen." The seller was a college athlete named Chloe. Her profile picture showed a girl with incredibly long, toned legs, sculpted from years of practice on the court. She was exactly what I was looking for. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near her campus. The entire experience was nerve-wracking. I sat there, a middle-aged man waiting for a young woman to sell me her used skirt. I felt like a predator, a creep. When she arrived, bright and bubbly, she handed me the skirt in a small plastic bag. "Here you go, hope your niece likes it," she said with a sunny smile. "I'm sure she will," I managed to say, my voice tight. I could smell the faint, clean scent of her laundry detergent on the fabric. I handed her the cash and practically fled the coffee shop, the little bag clutched in my hand like a stolen jewel. This became my new secret life. By day, I was Jason, the professional model scout. By night, I was Jen, the art student, scouring the internet for the perfect pieces of my puzzle. Each transaction was a miniature spy mission, filled with anxiety and a strange, illicit thrill. I bought a pair of high-waisted gym shorts from a fitness influencer named Mia. Her pictures showcased a perfectly curved, powerful lower body. When I met her, she was just as stunning in person. "These have seen a lot of squats," she joked, handing them over. I just nodded, unable to form a coherent sentence. I bought a delicate, black lace bra from a student named Olivia. Her ad described it as barely worn. Meeting her was the most difficult. She was shy and sweet, and I felt a profound sense of guilt as I paid her for something so incredibly personal. I could smell a hint of a floral perfume on the lace, and the intimacy of it made my stomach clench. My strangest purchase was a simple gray wool beanie. It belonged to a barista who worked at a trendy cafe downtown. Her name was Lily. I didn't care about her body, but her face in her profile pictures was exactly what I envisioned for myself: soft features, high cheekbones, and intelligent, kind eyes. More than that, in one photo where she wore the beanie, her hair cascaded out from under it long, straight, and the color of dark chocolate. I didn't know if the powder worked on hair, but I had to try. I told her I was buying it for my daughter. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Over 2 weeks, my collection grew. I had the tennis skirt for its youthful energy, the gym shorts for shape, the lacy bra for femininity, and the beanie for the face and hair I dreamed of. I also acquired a few other essential pieces: a pair of silky, high-cut lace panties from one seller, and a pair of sheer white thigh-high stockings from another. My apartment began to feel like a secret shrine. I kept the clothes in a locked chest at the foot of my bed. Sometimes, at night, I would open it and just look at them. I would touch the different fabrics: the soft cotton of the shorts, the delicate lace of the bra, the rough wool of the hat. Each piece was a promise, a fragment of a future self. The chest was filled with the faint, mingled scents of other women's lives, their perfumes, their detergents, their histories. It was intoxicating and humbling. I was holding the building blocks of a new person. The only question left was whether I had the courage to put them all together. The night I chose for the transformation was a Friday. I had cleared my weekend schedule. No meetings, no calls, no obligations. The world could forget Jason existed for 2 days. I waited until long after midnight, when the only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the quiet ticking of the clock on my wall. I opened the chest and laid out the pieces on my bed like a sacred ritual. The white gym shorts, the black lace bra, the silky panties, the sheer stockings, and finally, the gray wool beanie. They looked like a strange collection of disconnected items, but to me, they were a blueprint for a new life. My hands were surprisingly steady as I uncorked the vial of shimmering powder. I sprinkled a tiny amount on each garment, watching the silver dust vanish into the fabric. My heart wasn't pounding with fear this time. It was a deep, resonant thrum of anticipation. This wasn't an experiment anymore. This was an inauguration. I undressed and stood before the full-length mirror, taking one last look at Jason. I saw the tired lines around his eyes, the slight slump of his shoulders, the body that had always felt like a borrowed, ill-fitting suit. "Goodbye," I whispered to the reflection. I wasn't sure if it was a farewell or a release. I started with the foundation. I stepped into the silky panties. They were soft against my skin, and the moment they settled into place, I felt the first tingle of the change. It was a subtle shift deep within my pelvis, a fundamental realignment that was both unnerving and deeply, profoundly right. Next, I sat on the edge of the bed and rolled on the sheer white stockings. The fine synthetic fabric whispered against my skin as I pulled them up my thighs, as they smoothed over my legs. The transformation swept through them. I watched, utterly captivated, as the coarse hair disappeared, the thick muscles of my calves and thighs slimming down, elongating into a dancer's grace. The skin became pale and smooth. When I stood up, the legs in the mirror were not my own. They were long, slender, and flawless. My breath hitched. I reached for the white gym shorts I'd bought from Mia, the fitness influencer. They were snug, designed to hug every curve. As I pulled them up over the new silken stockings, the magic intensified, focusing on my hips and waist. The cinching at my waist was more defined this time. Pulling in to create a delicate curve, my hips flared out, soft and round, filling the shorts to perfection. I ran my hands down my sides, tracing the new shape. It was the curve I had spent a lifetime dreaming of. Now for the bra. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the black lace garment. This was the part that felt most significant, the most defining symbol of the womanhood I craved. I turned around, fumbled with the clasp at the back, and settled the straps over my shoulders. As the lace cups rested against my chest, the swelling began. It was a warm, blossoming sensation, a tender ache as my chest filled out, creating two perfect soft mounds that pressed gently against the delicate lace. The bra, which would have been loose and ridiculous on my male frame, now fit as if it were made for me, lifting and supporting a body that was becoming more real by the second. I was almost there. I stood in front of the mirror, a strange hybrid. My new female body from the neck down still topped with the head of a 47-year-old man. It was a bizarre, almost comical sight. The final piece was the beanie. I picked up the soft wool hat. This was the biggest gamble. Would it really change my face? My hair? I held my breath and slowly pulled the beanie down over my head, covering my thinning hair. The sensation was the most intense yet. It felt like cool water washing over my face, smoothing out the hard lines and rough edges. I felt the sharp angle of my jaw soften, my cheekbones rise, my nose become slightly more delicate, my brow relaxed, my lips felt fuller, and then, the most miraculous thing of all, I felt a weight on my shoulders and back. I reached up and my fingers brushed against hair. Long, soft, straight hair. I squeezed my eyes shut, not daring to look. I stood there for a long moment, just feeling the gentle weight of my breasts, the curve of my hips, the smooth skin of my legs, feeling the cascade of hair down my back. This was it. This was everything. With a deep, shuddering breath, I opened my eyes. The man in the mirror was gone. In his place stood a young woman. She was beautiful, but not in a way that was flashy or intimidating. She was alluring in a quiet, confident way. She had the long, toned legs of a tennis player, the beautifully curved hips of a fitness model, and a soft, feminine chest. Her face was a delicate heart shape, with high cheekbones and kind, dark eyes. And spilling out from under the gray beanie was a curtain of straight, dark chocolate-colored hair that fell to the middle of her back. She was a collage, a mosaic of dreams. She was perfect. And she was me. A sound I didn't recognize escaped my lips. A soft, broken sob. Tears began to stream down my new cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of profound, earth-shattering relief. It was the sound of a prisoner who had just been set free after a lifetime of captivity. I reached out and pressed my palm against the cool glass of the mirror, my reflection doing the same. We were finally one. For 47 years, I had been a ghost haunting someone else's life. But tonight, looking at the woman in the mirror, I felt like I had finally been born. She needed a name. Jen was a disguise, a tool. This person was real. I thought for a moment, letting the name come to me. It had to be something that felt as right as this body did. Alice, I whispered. The name felt soft on my new lips, a perfect fit. I smiled, a real genuine smile that reached my eyes. Alice smiled back. That's The first time Alice walked outside, the world felt brand new and terrifyingly sharp. I had spent hours just being in my apartment, getting used to the new sensations. I practiced walking, the subtle roll of my hips, the lighter footfalls. I discovered how different it was to sit, to cross my legs, to simply exist in a body with different proportions and a different center of gravity. My voice was the biggest surprise. It had settled into a pleasing alto, feminine but with a warmth and depth that felt natural. But the apartment was a safe cocoon. The real test was out there. For my first outing, I chose a simple outfit, a knee-length floral sundress. a pair of low-heeled sandals, and a light cardigan. It took me an hour to do my makeup, following online tutorials with painstaking precision. The final result was subtle, but it made me feel polished, complete. Walking in heels, even low ones, was a language my body didn't speak. I wobbled down my apartment hallway, clinging to the wall like a toddler taking their first steps. Each clack of the sandal on the floor sounded like a gunshot in the quiet building. My goal was simple, almost comically, so walk to the corner coffee shop, order a latte, and walk back. It felt like climbing Mount Everest. The moment I stepped out of my building and onto the sunlit sidewalk, I was hit by a wave of sensory overload. The breeze felt different on my bare legs. The sun felt warmer on my newly sensitive skin. And the looks? Oh, the looks. As Jason, I was practically invisible. A middle-aged man in a sea of other middle-aged men, people's eyes slid right past me. As Alice, I was a magnet. I felt gazes on me from every direction. A man on a bench lowered his newspaper to watch me walk by. A group of construction workers on the opposite side of the street fell silent. A woman walking her dog gave me a quick, appraising up and down glance. My first instinct was to shrink, to hunch my shoulders and disappear. I was a fraud, an imposter, and they could all see it. Every stride felt clumsy and awkward. I was sure my masculine origins were written all over me. My heart pounded with a familiar, suffocating panic. But then something shifted. A man walking towards me, a businessman in a sharp suit, met my eyes. He didn't look at me with suspicion or disgust. He smiled, a small, genuine, appreciative smile. He held my gaze for a second too long before looking away. It was a tiny thing, but it sent a jolt of electricity through me. It wasn't a leer. It was an acknowledgement. He saw a woman, and he found her attractive. That simple. Unspoken validation was like a drug. The fear didn't vanish, but a new feeling began to push through it, a heady, exhilarating thrill. I was being seen, for the first time in my life. I was being seen as the person I was always meant to be. I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and focused on walking. I tried to imitate the graceful sway I'd observed in so many models over the years. One foot in front of the other, hips leading the way, the wobble in my step began to lessen. I made it to the coffee shop, my nerves still frayed but my confidence bolstered. The bell above the door chimed as I entered. The young man behind the counter, a handsome kid with a sleeve of tattoos, looked up and his professional smile widened into something more genuine. "Hey there, what can I get for you?" he asked, his eyes bright. "I'll have a large iced latte, please," I said, my voice coming out a little breathier than I intended. "You got it," he said, tapping the order into his screen. As I pulled out my wallet, a new slim one I'd bought for Alice, he leaned against the counter. "I don't think I've seen you in here before." "It's my first time," I replied, handing him my card. He took it, his fingers brushing against mine for a fraction of a second. The contact was feather light, but it sent a spark up my arm. "Well, I hope it's not your last," he said, his gaze lingering on my face. "For what it's worth, you look gorgeous today." I felt a blush creep up my neck and onto my cheeks. I had never blushed in my life as Jason. The sensation was warm and overwhelming. "Oh, thank you," I stammered, feeling like a flustered teenager. "No problem," he grinned. "I'm just being honest. Name's Alex." "Alice," I said, finding my voice. "Alice, that's a beautiful name." I took my latte and practically floated out of the shop. The walk back to my apartment was completely different. The stares from strangers no longer felt like accusations, they felt like affirmations. The world wasn't judging me. The world was accepting me. It was welcoming Alice home. Back in the safety of my apartment, I leaned against the closed door, the cold cup of coffee pressed against my chest. My legs felt weak. That simple interaction, that compliment from a handsome stranger, felt like a rite of passage, a confirmation of my new reality. He called me gorgeous. He learned my name. He wanted to see me again. I had spent my entire life as Jason watching women receive this kind of casual, admiring attention. I had always viewed it from the outside, with a mixture of envy and longing, but to be on the receiving end, to feel that potent cocktail of flattery, power, and vulnerability. It was intoxicating. It was more than just an ego boost. It felt like a kind of birth certificate. stamped and approved by the outside world. Alice wasn't just a fantasy I enacted in my bedroom anymore. She was real, and she was spectacular. The idea was audacious, reckless, and utterly irresistible. I had spent over 2 decades in the modeling industry, but always behind the scenes, I knew what the photographers wanted. I knew what the designers were looking for. I knew the business inside and out from the perspective of a scout. Jason's greatest professional asset was his eye for talent. Now I realized it could be Alice's greatest weapon. I was going to get signed, and not just by any agency. I was going to get signed by my own. The thought alone was enough to make me feel dizzy. The irony was almost too perfect. The men and women I worked with every day, my colleagues, would be my judges. They knew Jason as a quiet, competent, but ultimately unremarkable middle-aged man. They would have no idea that the stunning new face walking into their casting call was him. I spent a week preparing. I studied my own reflection, learning my best angles. I practiced my walk for hours, transforming my apartment into a makeshift runway. I bought the perfect outfit, a sleek black bodycon dress that clung to every curve, sheer white stockings that accentuated the length of my legs, and a pair of classic black pumps that made me feel powerful. I practiced my makeup until I could create a look that was both striking and elegant, a flawless base, a sharp winged eyeliner, and a bold, deep red lipstick. The day of the open casting call, my stomach was a knot of terrified butterflies. As I took the elevator up to the agency's floor, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. I had ridden this elevator thousands of times as Jason, but today it felt like a rocket ship launching me into a new life. I walked into the familiar, bustling waiting room. It was filled with hopeful young women, all tall, all beautiful, all radiating an anxious energy. I took my place among them, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A few of my colleagues walked past. Mark, the head of booking, Jessica, another scout. They glanced at me, their eyes showing the same professional appraisal they gave every girl, but there was no spark of recognition. To them, I was just another anonymous hopeful. The disguise was holding. When they called my name Alice Chandler, the surname I had invented, I stood up, my legs feeling a little shaky. I walked into the casting room and the door clicked shut behind me. There they were, my boss, David Chen, a man I'd had lunch with just last week, my direct supervisor, Maria Flores, and 2 other senior agents. They sat behind a long table, their faces impassive. "Hello, Alice," David said, looking down at my headshot and resume, which I had carefully fabricated. "It says here you're new to the city." "Yes, that's right," I said, my voice steady. I channeled every ounce of confidence I could muster. "I moved here from Portland a month ago." "Well, let's see what you've got," Maria said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Walk for us." This was the moment of truth. I turned and walked to the end of the room, my hips swaying in a practiced, fluid motion. I could feel their eyes on me, dissecting my every move. I reached the far wall, paused, turned with a confidence I didn't feel, and walked back towards them. I stopped before the table and struck a pose, one hand on my hip. The room was silent for a long moment. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. David leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. He looked at Maria, who gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "You have a very striking look, Alice," David said finally. His professional mask had slipped just a little. I could see genuine surprise, genuine interest in his eyes. "Very unique. There's a maturity, a confidence there that you don't often see in new faces." "Thank you," I said, my lips curving into a small smile. "Do you have any experience with lingerie or swimwear?" Maria asked, her tone all business. "I'm comfortable with any kind of work," I replied smoothly. They asked me to turn, to show them my profile. They had me pull my hair back so they could see the line of my neck and jaw. It was the same process I had put countless girls through myself. To be on the other side was surreal. I wasn't an object, but I was being objectively evaluated, and I was passing. After a few more minutes, David looked at his colleagues again. "All right, Alice, thank you for coming in. We'll be in touch." The standard dismissal. I knew what it usually meant. Don't call us, we'll call you. My heart sank. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe they saw something, a flaw, a hint of the man I used to be. I managed a polite smile, thanked them, and walked out of the room, my confidence shattered. I was halfway to the elevator when the door to the casting room opened again. "Liz, wait up." It was Maria. She hurried over to me, a warm smile on her face. "Don't look so worried," she said, her voice low. "David was just being professional. We were all blown away. We want to offer you a contract." The world tilted on its axis. A contract already. "We know a star when we see one," she said, her eyes sparkling. "We want to book you for a test shoot next week, a new lingerie line for an online boutique. If you nail it, and I have a feeling you will, this could be the start of something big for you." I was speechless. All I could do was nod, a massive grin spreading across my face. "Welcome to the agency, Alice," Maria said, squeezing my arm. The lingerie shoot was a trial by fire. I stood in a brightly lit studio, wearing nothing but a delicate silk and lace set, surrounded by a crew of strangers, the photographer, the stylists, the assistants, all of them bustling around me. As Jason, I'd been on dozens of sets like this, but always from the other side of the camera, invisible. Now, every eye was on me. My vulnerability was absolute. For the first few minutes, I was stiff as a board. My smile felt frozen. My poses were awkward. The fear was back, whispering that I was a fraud, that I didn't belong here. The photographer, a young, energetic man named Mark, came over to me. "Hey, you okay? You seem a little tense. Just breathe. Forget we're all here. It's just you and the camera." I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The lonely nights as Jason, the thrill of the first transformation, the joy of being Alice. This wasn't just a job, this was the culmination of a lifelong dream. This was my victory. I opened my eyes, I looked directly into the camera lens, and I let all of that history, all of that emotion, show on my face. I wasn't just a body in lingerie, I was a woman with a story. Something clicked. The awkwardness melted away, replaced by a fluid confidence. I moved with an innate understanding of the light, the angles, my own body. I let the silk whisper against my skin, and I translated that sensation into my expression. I was no longer posing. I was simply being. Mark's camera started clicking in a rapid-fire succession. "Yes, that's it, beautiful, hold that, give me more," he shouted, his voice filled with excitement. The rest of the shoot was a dream. I moved from set to set, from one lingerie set to another, feeling more powerful and more myself with each click of the shutter. The initial vulnerability had transformed into a profound sense of empowerment. My body wasn't just being looked at, it was being celebrated. And by the end of the day, I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in my soul, that Alice wasn't just a new face. She was a star. Though it was on that first lingerie shoot that I met him, Mark, the photographer. He was maybe in his late 20s, with kind, intelligent eyes, a scruff of a beard, and an easy, infectious energy. Throughout the shoot, he was the consummate professional, but I felt something more in his direction than just a photographer's focus. It was in the small things, the way his eyes would linger on mine a second longer than necessary after giving a direction, the way he'd find an excuse to adjust a strap on my shoulder, his fingers warm and gentle against my skin, sending a little shockwave through my system. "Just hold your chin up a little higher," he murmured at one point, his face close to mine as he demonstrated. "Perfect. You have this incredible bone structure." His voice was a low, appreciative hum. As Jason, I had never experienced this. I had been the observer, the one appreciating beauty from a distance. To be the object of that appreciation. To feel a man's gaze on me not just as an image to be captured, but as a woman to be desired. It was disorienting and utterly exhilarating. After we wrapped, as I was changing back into my street clothes, Mark knocked on the door of my dressing room. "Alice, you have a minute?" he called through the door. "Sure, come in," I said, pulling on my sweater. He stepped inside, a slightly nervous smile on his face. "I just wanted to say, you were incredible today. Seriously, I've worked with a lot of models, and you have something special." "Thank you, Mark. That means a lot," I said, feeling that blush creep up my neck again. "You made it easy. You're very good at what you do." "Thanks," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Listen, this is probably unprofessional, but I was wondering if you might like to get a drink sometime to celebrate the successful shoot." My heart did a little flip. A man was asking me out. Me, Alice. The question hung in the air. charged with possibility, part of me, the old, cautious Jason, screamed that this was a terrible idea. It was too complicated, too dangerous. What could I possibly tell him? How could I build any kind of connection on such a monumental lie? But the other part of me, the part that was Alice, was buzzing with a life force I'd never known. She had been born into this body, into this world, to live, to experience things, and being desired, being asked out by a handsome, kind man, that was part of the experience. I'd love that, I heard myself say, a genuine smile spreading across my face. His face lit up. Great, how about tomorrow night? We made plans, and he left me with a final, lingering look that made my knees feel weak. I sat down in front of the lighted mirror, my reflection staring back at me. Alice looked flushed, excited, her eyes sparkling. But underneath, I could feel Jason's panic stirring. This was a line I hadn't anticipated crossing so soon. My transformation into Alice had been about self-discovery, about finally aligning my outside with my inside. I hadn't even considered romance, intimacy, or the complexities of a relationship. That night, alone in my apartment, the euphoria of the day began to curdle into a profound identity crisis. I sat in front of my mirror for hours, just looking. I touched the soft skin of my cheek, traced the curve of my new lips, ran my fingers through the long, dark hair. This was Alice's face. This was Alice's body. The world saw Alice. Mark saw Alice. But when I closed my eyes, who was I? Was Jason just a memory, a costume I had shed, or was he still in here? The pilot of this beautiful machine. The question echoed in the silent apartment. Am I still Jason anymore? I had started this journey to become a woman, but I was beginning to realize it was more complicated than that. I hadn't erased Jason. I had simply built upon his foundation. Alice's knowledge of the modeling world came from Jason. Her determination, her longing, her very existence was born from his lifetime of pain and desire. We weren't two separate people. We were two halves of a whole, a secret history hidden behind a beautiful face. The thought was both terrifying and strangely comforting. I wasn't an imposter in Alice's body. Alice was the ultimate, most authentic expression of the soul that had, for 47 years, been trapped in Jason's. She wasn't a mask I wore. She was the face I had finally earned the right to show. But could anyone else ever understand that? Could a man like Mark ever accept the truth I didn't know? And for the first time, I realized that the hardest part of my journey wasn't the transformation itself. It was learning to live with the beautiful, complicated truth of who I had become. The thrill of being desired was real, but it was tangled up with the deep, lonely secret that only I would ever know. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The lingerie photos were a massive success. The online boutique sales soared, and my agency was ecstatic. Maria called me into her office, her face beaming. "They're calling you the face that launched 1,000 clicks," she said, laughing. "Every brand we show your portfolio to wants a piece of you. Alice, we've got offers for a national cosmetics campaign, a swimwear spread in a major magazine, and even a potential runway spot for Fashion Week." My career, or rather Alice's career, exploded. I was living a life I had only ever witnessed from the sidelines. I was going to exclusive parties, wearing designer clothes, and seeing my face on billboards. My social media, managed by the agency, gained followers at an astronomical rate. I became an it girl, an overnight sensation. And through it all, there was Mark. Our drink turned into a dinner, which turned into many more. He was smart, funny, and passionate about his art. He looked at me with an adoration that was both thrilling and heart-wrenching. He was falling in love with Alice, the beautiful, confident model. He had no idea about the quiet, lonely man who had created her. Every date was a tightrope walk, a careful dance of half-truths and deflections. When he asked about my family, I invented a vague backstory about growing up in Oregon. When he asked about my past, I spoke in generalities about feeling like an outsider, about always wanting more from life which, in a way, was the absolute truth. The guilt was a constant companion, a stone in my gut, but the joy of being with him, of being seen and loved as Alice, was a powerful anesthetic. One evening, we were at his apartment, cooking dinner together, Music played softly in the background. I was chopping vegetables while he stirred a sauce on the stove. It was a scene of such perfect, simple domesticity that it made my heart ache. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You know," he murmured into my ear, "I've never met anyone like you." I stopped chopping, my hands frozen. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," he said, holding me tighter. "You're beautiful, obviously, but it's more than that. There's this depth to you, a wisdom in your eyes that seems older than you are. It's like you've lived a whole other life." His words hit me like a physical blow. He saw it. He couldn't possibly know what it was, but he saw the ghost of Jason in my eyes. The secret I was carrying was so immense, so heavy, that it was beginning to show. I knew I had a choice. I could continue the lie, push him away, and protect my secret. Or I could take the biggest risk of my life. But the thought of telling him the truth was paralyzing. How could I even begin to explain the powder, the transformation, the entire impossible reality of my existence? He would think I was insane. He would leave. The decision was made for me. My career reached a new peak. I was chosen to close a major show at New York Fashion Week. It was the ultimate validation, the pinnacle of the modeling world. The night of the show, the backstage area was a chaotic symphony of hairdryers, shouted instructions, and nervous energy. I stood in the wings, waiting for my cue, my heart a steady, calm drum in my chest. I was the final model, the star of the show, set to walk out in the designer's masterpiece, a breathtaking gown of shimmering silver. As I stood there, cloaked in a silk robe, I caught my reflection in a darkened monitor screen. I saw Alice poised, beautiful, at the absolute height of her success, and for a moment, I saw Jason, the 47-year-old scout, looking back at me from behind her eyes, his face filled not with longing or sadness, but with a quiet, profound pride. We had done it. The music swelled. The stage manager gave me the nod. "You're on, Alice." I shed the robe and stepped out from the darkness into a blinding supernova of light. Thousands of camera flashes went off at once. A storm of tiny, man-made stars. The runway stretched out before me like a path to a new world. On either side, rows upon rows of faces, industry giants, celebrities, critics were all turned towards me. Their collective gaze was a physical force, a wave of energy that washed over me. I began to walk. With each step, I felt the pieces of my life clicking into place. The lonely boy in his mother's closet, the frustrated teenager, the invisible middle-aged man. They weren't ghosts to be ashamed of. They were the foundation upon which Alice was built. They were the reason for her strength, her depth, her confidence. I was no longer just Jason, and I was no longer just Alice. I was both. I was a person forged in the crucible of a secret, impossible dream. I had taken the disparate, broken pieces of my soul and built something whole, something beautiful. I reached the end of the runway and paused, the camera flashes painting me in strobes of white light. The applause was deafening, a roar of approval that shook the entire hall. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the thousands of eyes all focused on me, a woman the world adored. A slow, serene smile spread across my face. The inner conflict, the guilt, the fear, it all just dissolved. In its place was a quiet, unshakable peace. I had spent so long feeling like I was born in the wrong body, in the wrong life, but looking out at my new reality, I understood. My birth hadn't been a mistake. It had just been delayed. And as the applause washed over me, a single silent thought bloomed in my mind, a quiet truth that settled into the very core of my being. Finally, I thought, a whisper just for myself. I was born the right way.